So we're just letting some folks in. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the Tattered cover and the Foundry Group's book discussion event. My name is Summer Nettles, and I'm your host, and we're very, very excited about the New Builders book, especially in this time where so many entrepreneurs of color are facing hardship. And it's important to understand that the real backbone of small business in our country rests on the shoulders of entrepreneurs of color. And so we're very grateful that Seth and Elizabeth took the time to do the research and gather all the information in this book that really supports the idea of giving entrepreneurs of color, women, the 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 stepping stone that they need in terms of venture capital funds and access, because without them, without us, because I'm a small business owner myself, that part of the economy really would sink, and so I'm super honored to have the authors of the book, New Builders, with us this evening, as well as Toddy, who is the president of Essentialize. I mean, which is an incredibly innovative, strategic company that is helping entrepreneurs build wonderful foundations for their businesses. And we do have a few other panelists who will be joining us throughout the course of the evening. But folks, if you're tuning in live, thank you for joining us on a Friday night. It's about to rain, so you came at the right time. And for those of you watching later on this recording, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, reach out to the Tattered cover for more information, because these folks, the folks on this panel, are all about fertilizing this earth of new builders. So I'm going to start with Elizabeth, and we'll go from right to left. And I'd love for you guys to share a little bit about yourselves, and for the authors as well to share what made you inspired to write this book, because you started writing it well in advance of COVID. So Elizabeth, I would love for you to share that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'll kick off. So I'm I'm Elizabeth MacBride, co-author of The New Builders, and I am a longtime business journalist and the founder of a publication called Times of Entrepreneurship, which covers the world of entrepreneurs beyond Silicon Valley. I've been a business journalist for a long time, written for most of the big publications in the US and some around the world, but got frustrated over the years that the stories that I really wanted to tell and the ones that I thought were important weren't being told. And so that's why I founded Times of Entrepreneurship. And as I was focusing on that issue, I happened to meet Seth. We crossed paths in Jerusalem a couple of years ago, kind of met over the phone, and I remembered him, followed up and landed in his office in Boulder, and we just started talking about doing a project together. And that project evolved into The New Builders.
That's incredible. I really appreciate that. And what a place to intersect. Jerusalem.
And then you're magic. Yeah.
And you're both from the Colorado area.
Well, I live in Alexandria, Virginia, but so yeah. But Jerusalem is truly a magical place. Like, a lot of things happen there.
Yeah, I see. And when you met Elizabeth, tell us about that magic. Tell us about, because you had already been doing venture capitalism. So where she was frustrated on the writing side, you were frustrated on the how.
Yeah, no. So we met over this shared interest for entrepreneurs whose stories aren't often told in the mainstream press. And so, for me, that was, I do a lot of work in Palestine. I work with really the only two now venture funds in Palestine, but both of the first venture funds there. So we kind of bonded over this shared interest in entrepreneurs in different places, right? Elizabeth's reported from all over the world about small business owners doing interesting things, in their communities. And so we bonded over that. Obviously, I have a day job. I've been a venture capitalist for 20 years. I started a firm here in Boulder 12, 15 years ago, now called Foundry Group. And we manage over $3 billion. So we're, I mean, very, it's very Silicon Valley-like firm. We happen to be based in Boulder. So I'm in that circle, in that world. But I've been concerned with the way in which Silicon Valley technology entrepreneurship has sort of overtaken our view of entrepreneurship. And so Elizabeth and I had this shared interest in talking about entrepreneurs globally that were doing interesting things. And we sat down in Boulder, as Elizabeth describes, and started talking about, hey, there's great stories to tell of entrepreneurs that are working in the United States that we don't necessarily talk about, and we don't necessarily think about as entrepreneurs, because Silicon Valley has kind of stolen that word. And so we thought we'd write a more of a lighthearted book about highlighting, we were going to call it Faces of Entrepreneurship. It was going to highlight some interesting kind of Main Street entrepreneurs. And then we looked at then we dug into the data, started doing some research, and found out that entrepreneurship in the United States is in a state of profound decline. And that was alarming. And this was pre-COVID. And so and interestingly, we took that finding to a number of our friends in venture business journalism. And people didn't believe us. They just thought our data were wrong. But that's just not true. We have rock solid data on this. And there are a few people, Ben Castleman, a couple of the New York Times, a couple of other people have been following this trend for a little while. And then we did a bunch of research for about a year, and then we started writing it up right as COVID hit. And as most people realize, COVID affected businesses that were run by people of color more significantly than other businesses, for lots of different reasons that we can get into. And then it became much more urgent. And so we actually, for the writers that are listening in, we basically wrote this book, but we did the research, which took a little over a year, probably a year, 15 months or so. But we actually wrote the book from June until October of 2020. We were just writing constantly because we really felt like we needed to get the message out as quickly as possible. So this is launch week. The week we're recording this is launch week. So the book is just out, and it was so much effort to get it out. We're so relieved and thankful that it's out in the wild now.
Yeah, it's super timely, and really interesting that you found that entrepreneurship is on the decline so much. But we know, in 2007, Black American women started 164% of the new firms in the United States. And we know as of 2020 that Latinos are the most prolific group of small business owners currently, growing at the fastest rate. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really important to know as we talk about books like this, because those folks like myself, I'm of Black and Puerto Rican descent, are trying to navigate this landscape with a language that we don't have. And so the idea that we reach maturation, that 5-year point, is lofty for us. And that's why it's so important that we have people like Tati to help us strategize. And so what is it, Tati, that you find in entrepreneurship for Black and Brown Indigenous women that seems insurmountable?
Yeah, Summer, you are so right. There are so many different things that are just not really easy for most of us, especially most of us that come from a different country. And even if we have lived here for, in my case, 30 years, it's still hard. So I think that one thing is the system. Obviously, it's different. But that is probably every entrepreneur runs into that. Something else is we have to overcome the language, the culture. Who is it that the marketing? So many entrepreneurs get into entrepreneurship because they have an idea, they have something they love, but it's not that they have the MBA in everything entrepreneurship, right? They don't know marketing and finances, and they're not doctorates in everything. So there are so many roles that we need to play, and it becomes very overwhelming. But it's more overwhelming, but it's not your culture. It's not like the initial culture. You don't have a set of people that have led the way and showed you this is what you need to be doing. that becomes so very difficult.
Mhm.
And how do you at Essentialize streamline that for folks? What do you put out
Yes.
for?
So in the past, so my previous career was marketing and branding, and we were helping small businesses and corporations launch their brands. And what I noticed as we were doing that, I call it that agency for a decade. And what I noticed was that people will come out with an idea, and then they will start looking at the competition, and they will start looking at what is the other one doing, so I will be doing that. And that becomes it really is a failed proposition. So what we do right now, so I left that company and launched another company. And what I really want is authenticity. I want to bring the best. So I want to be able to touch the entrepreneur and be able to come to get from their heart and from their head. What is it that they really, what's the initial idea? What is it that what's their dream? What's their why? What is it that they want to do and establish, and how do they want to impact the world? And so with that, then we can create a brand that is authentic and that is, it really reflects who they are. And then everything else becomes magical, because once you really know who you are and what you're here for, everything else is easy.
I think that's so brilliant. And speaking of authentic, I think one of the most authentic brands in the Denver metro restaurant arena is Maria Empanada. And I'm so excited that Lorena has joined us. Lorena, if you would introduce yourself and then maybe talk to us about one thing that you faced head on when you decided to, to open and begin this journey with Maria Empanada.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
And I love to hear those different, like Tari say, these kind of different accents, and probably mistaken words. And that is actually what it brings beauty to this country and to who we are here in the United States. So yeah, it's some spicy right there, right? There's some spices differently, and I love them. So yes, the journey is with Maria Empanada was something that I reflect, that is something that it comes with me, and is probably the, the word that can say best is courageous. Oh my goodness, I needed to be courageous to open a business in the United States, without knowing the language. And I don't know if that is still noticeable, but not knowing the language, not knowing how to do things, not having a manual to how to operate. But what I think is that courageous that always follow me, or follow the my background, right? Our countries. Sometimes you need to be courageous just to live in our countries, and at the same time, the union with love. That is is incredible combination on the formula, and that make you completely unstoppable. So even that a lot of barriers or obstacles comes to you, you continue the road. And that's how I think that my brand it is right now. It's a brand that is that has courageous, that has love, and that is absolutely unstoppable. So
Courageous and delicious.
and great and delicious. Right.
Absolutely. Courageous and delicious. That is so, so true. I think one of the things that we have to talk about when we talk about entrepreneurship is why the mass exodus of Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks from the workforce. So we know that for every year in salary a white man earns, a Black woman has to work 256 days, a Latina woman has to work 306 days to make that equivalent. And so why wouldn't you take the risk? Why wouldn't you take the chance? Because it's a risk every day when you go in and you know that you have a retirement fund that's not going to be fully funded the way that it is for your white male counterpart, right? I mean, what else is there at that point? And I think we're survivors.
Mhm.
So Elizabeth and Seth, can you talk to us about some statistics in the book that really kind of bear that out and tell that story?
So Seth will have a handle, because he's got such a great head for numbers, right, on the exact stat of the number of people who start businesses because they want to be their own boss. And that, I think, is the number one or number two reason why people go into business, statistically, in the survey that we used. But kind of embedded in that be your own boss is exactly what you're talking about, which is that the corporate world is so much of a mismatch for so many of the new builders, right? And not only Black and Hispanic and Indigenous, but also older people, white women, right? It's a funny and strange thing that it's a mismatch for almost everybody except kind of people who really fit in the patriarchy, right? And I'm not even sure that most white men like enjoy being in the corporate world much anymore either, because it's uncomfortable in a lot of ways. And we actually saw that in the pandemic, right? Those stats that said that women made up all of the job losses in a single month, right? I mean, what clearer sign could there be of how much corporate not kind of valuing and creating an atmosphere that is comfortable for most of us to work and be productive.
We have some great quotes in the book about this, because I think there's a couple things that are that you touched on that are really important. And it's about a third of people start their own business because they want to be their own boss, right? They want to get out of their current situation. It is the most common reason that people leave, or at least the site for leaving a job and starting something on their own. That's always been the case, right? I mean, I think that we wrote a chapter in the book about the history of entrepreneurship, which hasn't been written before, which is odd. We went to look for it. There's lots of books about entrepreneurs individually, but there wasn't anything we could really find that was sort of about entrepreneurship and the history of entrepreneurship. And it was actually kind of hard to find the history of entrepreneurship that was inclusive of women and people of color, because we've tended to write them out of that history for a bunch of different reasons, right? I mean, for 400 years, we've literally not valued the labor of Black people, right? For many, many years. And the same was true in terms of how we looked at the work of many women, right? Their endeavors were not seen as business endeavors, even though they were, right? And Elizabeth wrote this great line, I won't take credit for it in the book, that we sort of had to divine, like ghosts in the system, these stories. And we tried to bring some of them into that chapter to just give people a flavor for the contributions that women and people of color have made all across to very interesting things, and the kind of things that we use every day now still, right? And so we tell a bunch of their stories because it is easy to write, or it has been easy to write them out, and we feel like that's really the problem. And there's a couple of quotes in the book from someone who's local to Denver as well, Makisha Booth. She runs an organization called Sistabiz. And she talks a lot about sort of women. She works mostly with Black women. With the women that she works with, just got fed up with being in this sort of corporate world where they felt like they weren't able to reach their potential. And so many of the women that she works with left their corporate jobs for that reason. And she now has this network of Black women that help each other out and work on their businesses. And it's really, I mean, it's incredibly powerful what she's built. Maybe we'll talk later about the power of networks, because that's something that we touch on a lot in the book. But that question is so important, and it really gets to this challenge that we've had as a country of just dealing with the fact that we just don't value the work of women and people of color in the way that we value the work of people that look like me.
Thank you so much for writing that chapter of the book. It is so relevant, and it's frightening. It's frightening that we're at 2020, now 2021. And we're just now seeing this. And I think it's really pertinent that it's coming from someone who's been in venture capital for so long and someone who's been writing about business for so long, right? Like, for whatever reason, and Tati and Lorena, I'm sure you'll echo this, when we and folks who look like us bring issues to folks of power, they're generally dismissed. How do you encourage, Tati, people to navigate that space?
So you think about it, Summer, there are certain type of people that become entrepreneurs. And what you have is we think, or we like to say that we have it in our blood. But if you think about it, it's people who are risky, people who take like a different path in life. And even if they follow the right equation, you get a college degree and you get a master's degree if you want to excel, and you go into the corporate world. Like there's something inside of you that is calling you to do something different, right? That's the entrepreneur as a whole. Now, we do know that there is people that we come to this country for a different reason, or we are born in families that have come to this country, second generation, third generation, but they are, it's almost like they're entrepreneurs inside of them. And we cannot help but to just be born in that environment and grow in that environment. And this is what you need to do, and you need to excel, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. And so all of a sudden, it's like all these ideas start forming in our heads and in our hearts. And at some point, it becomes just a little bit easier. Once we tried corporate, it becomes a little bit easier to just say, you know what? It was good there, but it could become even better. Where can I excel at the most? And so when you have entrepreneurs are just that type of people. When they have an idea, there's nothing, it's like they can be doing something else, but they have to be thinking about this. And when you have that in your heart, you can't get it out. You have to make it a reality. You have to manifest it somehow.
I hear that. Lorena, what did you do the first time you got a no? How did you power through that? How do you
I go for more no's. I'm unstoppable. So if you hear a no, you go for more no's because you know that you are going to get this switch any moment, right? And it's going to be a maybe and then a yes. And the no's can't stop you. And the no's needs to get you better and put you in a better way and position. And if it has to do with a battle for a bank, you need to make it better for the next no and get it better until you get the yes. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Is the transformation of an entrepreneur, right? It is transforming the no's, the feeling void that is something negative. And a no, as I always mention, is not just a no. That if somebody that tells you no, it is you're not valuable, you're wasting your time, this is not going to work, blah 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 blah. No, my function is to transform the no into yes, the negativity into positivity, and make forward and continue moving and make things happen.
I totally get that. When I started Greater Purpose Media, like I had forgotten myself in many ways. So like, yes, I'm an Emmy Award winner. Yes, I've done work for the city and county. Yes, I'm a cancer survivor. Yes, I'm a triathlete, right? But because when I looked in the mirror, all I could see was no, I had to go all the way home to Puerto Rico, to San German, and get a tattoo that says, I am relentless. Mm-hmm. And whenever I look at my tattoo, I'm like, oh yeah, this no, I got you, no, I got you today, right? And so I think it's about not just turning that negativity into positivity, but turning that negativity into productivity. And taking that no and saying, these are the elements of that no, and these are the pieces I need to switch, right? which is what Tati, you do at Essentialize. But I also want to speak to something that all of you kind of have touched on, which is that networking element of it. And Seth, I think for entrepreneurs of color, we find the struggle in getting into those rooms. What is your advice for folks that look like us?
Yeah, let's talk about networking a little bit more holistically, because I think one of the key themes of the book is really community. And we think about community sort of in two aspects, right? One is community, like place, like physical community, which is really important. And one of the things that I think is missing, there's like a certain humanity that seems to be missing at the moment, and it's just sort of in our dialogue and everything that's going on. And we talk a lot about sort of new builders being this really important connection to community and place, and this sort of bridge between different ideologies. And that's really important. So we talk a lot about that. And it was, I don't think it surprised Elizabeth. It surprised me a little bit in the sense I don't think I deeply thought about that, but it just kept coming up over and over every time we were talking with new builders. But there's also community, which is sort of being in community with other entrepreneurs. And it's really important. And one of the things that Silicon Valley has done, we talk a lot about the things that Silicon Valley takes credit for inventing in the book that they haven't actually invented, which is, there's a long list of those things. But there are some things that Silicon Valley frankly does really well. And one of them is they are very adept at providing support for businesses, right, through business accelerators and all sorts of things. And that model works really well for them. I should point out, by the way, that only about 1% of all businesses in the United States take money from venture capital. So it's a lot of money, and it's a big part of the economy. And of course, the businesses that they start are enablers for other businesses, right? Restaurants use Toast or OpenTable or whatever, and lots of people use Google to market and things like that. So they enable lots of small businesses are users of the business or the technology that's created in Silicon Valley. But 99% of businesses are not taking money from venture capitalists. And the solution, by the way, isn't to, yes, venture has its own diversity challenges, which we can talk about separately, but the solution isn't to turn that 1% to 2%, right? The solution is to figure out how we get money. We talk a lot about capital in the book, but how we get more money to this 99%. And by the way, only about 17% of businesses take money from banks, right? So it's 80% of businesses that are 80+% of businesses sit in this middle where they don't get any formalized capital, and that's a problem. But the idea of creating community, and I mentioned SistaBiz. I saw your note in the chat that you're a member, which is great. It's networks like that are really important, and we talk about. When we have a chapter where we talk about new capital models, new financing models, but one of the things that we observe in that chapter is that most of the most effective models pair some form of community and assistance with capital. In the CDFI world, that's called technical assistance, in the community banking world. So call it whatever you want, but that's really critically important. And we really highlight that as something that we need to get better at. And we do talk about a few organizations, one in particular, Entrepreneurship for All, which was started in Massachusetts. They actually are now in Longmont too, which is where I am right now. And they're moving to some other markets in Rhode Island and upstate New York. And they specialize in working with underserved entrepreneurs, specifically entrepreneurs of color. And they've got a very, very successful model for helping entrepreneurs. So I'll pause there because I imagine Elizabeth has a few things to add to this, but it's a really critical part of what we talk about.
I was just going to ask Elizabeth for her thoughts. And also, it would be wonderful, Seth, if you could share that Longmont information in the chat.
Sure, I'll put it right in.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I have just a whole bunch of thoughts, because this is something that I've considered so much, like as I've interviewed so many entrepreneurs over the years and what's helped them succeed, and talking to people who want to start businesses but can't quite, right? They're afraid of something and something's holding them back. And maybe I'll just highlight the central story in our book. The one we return to several times is Danaris Mazzara, who is a baker in Lawrence, Massachusetts. And she has got an incredibly inspiring story in that she started her business with $37 in food stamps. She didn't have enough money to buy groceries. Her husband had lost a job, and her mom gave her the $37, and she went out and bought the ingredients to make flan, and then sold it on the break table at Samsung at the factory where she worked. And that's how she started, and then she kept going. And one of the key ways that she kept going is that the women of her community really surrounded her with love and very effective practical help, in that they taught her how to bake cakes. They came over to her house 3 Saturdays in a row, she told me, and they made cakes together. And she took to it naturally, and they were all amazed. But it was that community of women that really got her going. And then it was again women who got her to start again, because she had quit, right? She had had a second baby. She was like overwhelmed. Her husband wasn't crazy about her working. And so she quit. And then she ran into a friend in the grocery store who said, "You have to help me bake a cake this weekend. I'm having a party. What am I going to do?" And so it was women again, that emotional support that got her off the ground. And then the second chapter of her story, it's like chapter 6, I think, in our book, is that she then found another network of support, which was bigger and more diverse, in Entrepreneurship for All. And that was made up of an Indian immigrant, Desh Deshpande, a white guy from Silicon Valley who decided he didn't want to be in the tech world anymore, and a Brazilian immigrant who had come over 20, 30 years before. And they then surrounded her with another kind of love and practical help, and helped her rise again with the financing that she needed, and like practical bookkeeping help and that kind of thing. And so that's like, it's really not, it's impossible to separate the finances from the emotional support and the caring. And I've heard the word love, I think, a few times in our talk tonight, and I love that it's coming up, right? It's a basic ingredient, I think, in starting a business.
I think
So
you're right.
yeah.
I think you're right on the money. And like, yeah, like those chapters and like highlighting this story, it was so, so powerful for me. So I got the book late, and I like really like, oh my God, let's hurry up. But yeah, that coalition building, I think for small businesses and small business owners is so important. And it doesn't even just exist solely in the small business space, right? We know that we achieved civil rights legislation through coalition building as well. And Lorena, if you could talk about the coalition you built around you to make Maria Empanada what it is today, that would be great. And how did you find folks?
Yes, it's basically the story that Elizabeth mentioned that she put in the chapter number 6, I believe, is Maria Empanada's story too. I felt completely close to that, starting from nothing and with a lot of support of the community, right? I mean, the people, my Argentinian friends at the beginning who knew what an empanada was, and then more people that tried to get the empanadas because they wanted to support me. I was also with 2 kids, and it was so difficult at that moment. But I always felt that I was not alone in the journey, and that is very important. Even with my first employee, I felt that the trip was from now 2 of us working in the company. So there was some community right there. I mean, somebody that started working with me, they start putting a love and effort because they saw how much we wanted this to grow. And at the time that you were increasing, you need more support, right? You need help. And one of the things that as an entrepreneur, sometimes it happens is that you uh, put yourself in a room and you need to make the restaurant. So you're working in the recipe, you're working in the customer service, you're working in everything. Because lack of money, of course, lack of ways to pay to somebody to help you, and because you can do it and you need to do it because you need to know the ABC of your business. But that puts you in that box, and you need to come out of that box. You need to understand how the company is an independent entity and it's not you. It needs to start living by itself, and you need to have your life too. And then is when more people start coming to your life and to the entity life. Maria Empanada is not Lorena, and Lorena is not Maria Empanada. We are two different people, and we feel for each other, right? But it is important for me as the owner, seeing how Maria Empanada is growing and growing, or when it has pain, and I need to be able to support it, and I need to be able to see it from another aspect that is not Lorena, is Maria Empanada, and I need to support her. So then is when you start seeing the rest of the people coming to your place, right? I mean, financially, venture capitals, banks, mentors. I mean, a wonderful book to support you, or somebody who tells you what book do you need to read to get help. So the point of my idea is get out of that box, because you are not a box, and the box can get you sick also, and you need to be strong and with a lot of effort and force, internal force, to come out and make sure that the company is going in good direction and alive.
I think that's amazing, amazing advice, because it is a box. And then the other thing I think happens is that, like, we are afraid that we're going to run into competition. And one of the things I tell people all the time is if competition was a problem for McDonald's, Wendy's wouldn't exist, right? Like, there's like, competition is only there to make your product better, and also to guide you along the way. So if you hoard yourself and hoard your idea and never share it because you're afraid of the competition, it'll never see the light of day. Never, ever, ever, ever. But yeah, Lorena hits on a super important point, Tati, and that is the asking for help. And I think for entrepreneurs, for us, it's like, oh, no. If I can't do it myself, no one else needs to do it. So when you advise folks to ask for help from people whom they've never met and may not have a connection with, what kind of advice do you give them to reach out and establish that first connection?
So one thing, that's such an important point, Summer, because one thing is to say, okay, you need to, so-and-so is doing this, and he knows or she knows, and you should reach out. But another thing is for the entrepreneur to actually be able to reach out. So there is something that we don't talk about, and is, what is the reason why so many small businesses fail? And I think that they fail because, or one of the main reasons, and I hope that Seth and Elizabeth have some statistics about this, but I believe that one of the main reasons is because they didn't have the right mindset, meaning they did not have enough trust in themselves to be able to reach out and call somebody who could be a mentor, or they did not have the right mindset to be able to have the confidence to go and sell their story, basically, and get some money to be invested in the company. Or they didn't have the right mindset to actually know that competition doesn't really exist. The competition is amongst them. How were they before, the week before, the month before, the year before, and who are they becoming, and how are they going to be competing against themselves, not the people next door. So really thank you, mindset is so important. And that's the elephant in the room that we don't talk about. Mm-hmm. We should. Mm-hmm. So that's what we do. We train these people. That's what I love being a coach right now, because before it was all exterior, right? Like, I created great marketing campaigns, great branding, great PR. And then it was up to them to really get it going. But then again, they will come back the next year or the next quarter. We need another campaign. When you have the right mindset, you will need the campaign just to continue growing, but not because so many customers came and then they all left, or the majority of them left. Like, you know what you are doing for sure, and then you are able to serve this market completely authentically.
I love that, Todi. It's fantastic.
Mhm.
Two just thoughts. One is a lot of people skip over the forward of books, right? Because you want to get into the meat of it, and don't do that here, because Tyra Banks wrote a great forward to the book, and it was. I've told this story a couple of times in events like this, but you know, when you ask someone to write a forward, you sort of write part of it for them, and you sort of send them a draft, because usually we're asking people that are super busy, and obviously Tyra is busy, and so Elizabeth and I sent a draft that Elizabeth wrote. Actually, I didn't write that, and Tyra sort of wrote a note back and was like, no, like I'm that's not my voice. Like I'm gonna write it. So then at like 4 a.m, this draft shows up. And it's so authentic, it's powerful. She titled it herself. It's called Own Your Fierce Power. One of the things she talks about is reaching out for help. She calls it make freezing cold calls. And so I wanted to flag that, because I think oftentimes people don't read the forwards of books because they kind of want to get into it. But in this case, I really would encourage people to read that. And this idea of confidence is really important. One of the other networks that we profile in the book is this group called Digital Undivided out of Atlanta, started by Catherine Finney, who's an amazing Black female entrepreneur, who's now actually starting a venture fund of her own. And she's just a really incredible person. And one of the things that they do is they work on confidence. They actually talk about that. They specialize in working with Black women, Hispanic women specifically. And so they have a whole module. They do a bunch of modules, but one of their modules is on confidence. And I think it's really important. And it's important just to sort of acknowledge it. And again, it's like one of those things that it came up a bunch of times as we were speaking to either individuals, new builders, or people that were building networks around new builders. And so I just wanted to reemphasize that point, because I think it's really important, Todi. Thank you for saying it.
Thank you, Todi. I really appreciate it. And I think in line with that, confidence is pride. And I think we're at a point in American history where people of color and women are actually allowing ourselves to take pride in who we are. We've been working so hard to fit in for so long that it's really hard to stop contorting yourself, you know? Like it's really hard to say, I can break out of this mold and still be successful. You know, it's really hard to write that authentic email without thinking about the person on the end of the email who's going to receive it. But baby, if you never write it, it's never going to do any work, right? So you have to start somewhere. And I know we have some folks who took the time out of their evenings tonight to ask questions and to meet with all of you. If you're a guest who's live and you want to ask a question, now is the time. We've got about 13 minutes before we wrap it up. So I want to make space for those folks and thank them for coming.
There are a couple questions in the Q&A. I just pulled it up. Lorena, I love this one. How did it feel when VP Harris came to your restaurant? I think everyone wants to know that.
Oh my goodness, just to hear it again. Oh, it was, what can I say? I mean, the way how I say it is like, life is not easy, never. Starting leaving my country and arriving here, it was not easy at all. Having a business is not easy. I felt several times, and you probably saw, you didn't see me, but I cried several times. But what this has to do with the vice president, right? The way how I see it is that that was kind of like the present of life for all the effort that people doesn't see, right, in your role, or doesn't know, or that's only the things that you suffer. And having the visit of the vice president of the United States, to me particularly, that I'm a new citizen, is it was that kind of picture, the final picture that you take in the summit, you know, and you don't, and you just see all the the raining, the sunny days that you were climbing and crying and probably feeling alone and a lot of things. But you get to the summit and then you see the beautiful view. That was having the visit of the Vice President of the United States in my restaurant. That's the feeling.
That's phenomenal. Like I am tearing up.
The entrepreneur that that Elizabeth talked about, Danaris, who started her business with $37 worth of food stamps, she has a picture in her shop, in her bakery, of the governor of Massachusetts when he came to visit. And anyway, we actually wrote a little bit about that, but it's really, I think it's absolutely fascinating. It's wonderful. We went to this, I don't think we did know we talked about tea in the book too. Sometimes I forget that we met so many new builders. I forget which ones we put in the book and which ones we didn't, but he has this letter. This is a barber that's in Virginia. I think there's a picture even in the photo insert of Elizabeth and me with him. But he's got this letter he's been in the same location for 50 years cutting hair. He's got this great cash register. You can only charge $5 at a time. So he has to ring up, multiple $5 charges to charge for his haircuts. But anyway, he's got this letter from the governor celebrating his his tenure there, 50 years in this location. It's pretty remarkable. So I love it. And we need more recognition for small businesses, but then what we really need is VP Harris and others to go back to Washington and actually take action that helps small businesses, right? I mean, we trace back a little bit of the history of, both Republicans and Democrats love to talk about small business. They put them in their party platforms. They talk about them, from their various podiums and things like that. But not a lot of them really take actions that support small business. And that's true of Democrats and Republicans. And we talk about some ideas. It's not a particularly political book, but we do talk about some ideas about what we can do to be better stewards and better supporters of small businesses, and how to frankly bring our economy back into balance. The book is not about big business being bad and small business good, but we talk about balance and dynamism in the economy, and we're just out of balance.
Elizabeth, can you say more about that, about what it takes for small businesses to really grow and proliferate from a policy side?
Yeah, so this is one of the main points in the book, and I think one of the reasons that it will make a difference. We've been so happy this past week at all of the people and the diverse world of people that are reading it and getting something from it. It makes me feel great. But the story here that the statistics tell, because you've got entrepreneurship declining broadly over 40 years, you have this rising group of new builders who are women and Black people and Hispanic women, like everything we've been talking about. So they're entrepreneurial and they're starting small businesses, but then they hit a roadblock, which is they don't have access to capital. And that's because our finance system is so structured for the last generation of entrepreneurs. It's like stuck in 1950 and not even a good version of 1950, right? And so we really need to look at structurally, how do we make the finance system friendlier to the people who are starting and want to start businesses and help them grow? I mean, it shouldn't be like rocket science, right? We should be able to figure this out. And so one of the things that we really hope is that people like Vice President Harris, like Isabel Guzma, who's the new SBA administrator, will be leaders in figuring out how to restore our community banking system, which has declined so much, which is so important. And, innovate. There's lots of ways to innovate now with the great technology that we have, that maybe we can turn more people into local investors in their businesses, right? There's just tons of ideas. And we talk about a bunch of them in the book. And I always just, encourage small business people, if they want to take on that role, but you're already a visionary, right? You already have so many of those skills. So to become a leader in your community and just keep leading, because really we need the voices of of new builders.
It's so true. And I think a lot of times too, Black and brown folks, Indigenous folks, women, we really underestimate our voices and our importance. I love to use this story with my students when I'm teaching communication. The reason the Cosby Show emerged is because we were in a recession. So the Cosby Show is Family Ties 2.0. NBC knew that Black people had discretionary funds. And so they were like, we aren't selling commercials to anybody who's buying if we just do Elise Keaton. So now we're gonna do Bill and Claire Huxtable.
Mhm.
And that's how we got the Cosby Show.
Mhm.
And that is one of their most successful series, and continues to shape the version and vision of ourselves that we see today, right? So often it is in tragedy where people of color get opportunity, right? Now it's COVID. Okay, now you get opportunity. You know, then it was a recession. Okay, now you're going to get recognized. What we're looking for is the kind of legislation that makes long-term impact in our communities so that our children's children don't have to sweat it out, because like my mom already did that for me, right? You know, and so I think that that is so important. We get past these elections and take our eye off the ball and wonder why we're not scoring points. We got to keep driving. We got to keep being a driving force. So yeah, so we're almost at time. Anything else you guys would like to share? This has been incredible. I'm going to open up the floor for you.
I just want to add that I made sure that the VP knew that we need more access to banks.
Good.
And
Good.
she, all those no's that I told you that I received were from banks, and I told him we need to be bankable. We
Yeah.
need to be bankable.
Love that. We
Awesome.
cite a ton of research in the book
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
access to banking capital. And it just, I mean, our banking system's biased in ways that are just so demonstrable. Like we can actually fix some of this, but we just have to have the will to do it. But the banking system is in trouble right now. We talk about this, but 20 years ago, there were 14,000 banks in the United States. Today, there's 4,800. Most of the consolidation has happened at the lower end, meaning the smaller banks. And those banks are the community banks that tend to be more connected with people and place. And so, you know, we're not going to like unconsolidate the banks. So we need to think of other ways, supporting the CDFI system, easing maybe some of the regulations on the lower end, on the community banking side, which really can't keep up, and figuring out ways to be a little bit cautious, because 80% of US deposits are captured by 4 banks right now. And there's just too much. We've turned them into utilities, and the algorithms they use to make lending decisions are biased. And like, we know that, but we need to figure out what to do about it. So I'm glad to hear that she at least acknowledged that. And hopefully she'll start working on it.
Yeah.
I have a couple of things that I would love to empower the entrepreneurs who are watching or who will be watching this later. So the first one is to work on their zone of genius. Sometimes, every single time we become an entrepreneur, we wear so many hats that we forget that there's a certain number of things that we know how to do well and that bring so much joy and that we love doing. And that's where we need to spend the time. Everything else, we can probably delegate or hire somebody, because learning how to do those things is a waste of our time. Mm-hmm. And the second is mindset. I cannot bring that point I cannot highlight it even more. Without it, we will fail. And so we just need to raise it. Now we have the great idea, we have the risk, we can risk it, we can do it all. Now get the mindset so that you can be confident and you can go sell your company. Confidence is for so many things, like Seth was saying. The confidence is so important. You have to present, you have to sell, you have to be able to love your product and explain what that product is and explain the story, like Lorena has done today. We have to explain the story. Lorena is, and it is not, as you said, Maria Empanadas, right? But the story, we love the story. We support that story as fellow Latinos. Lorena, I go eating there so often, and I tell everybody about it, and everybody who tries it loves it. And it is, right? Like we support each other, but instead of competing, let's help each other and let's bring everybody up the way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I have one more to add, if I can. One more thing for the entrepreneurs coming this journey. Like you see, location, location, location. I will say vacation, vacation, vacation. You need to take time off, completely off. No cell phones, no computer, completely trust that somebody else is going to be taking very well care of your business, and you need to disconnect.
So true.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Elizabeth, do you have something you want to chime in with?
No, I cannot add. I think vacation, vacation, vacation is the absolute perfect thing to end on.
Right on. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And folks, please go to Tattered Cover or your favorite bookseller that is small, we hope, and pick up New Builders. It's an incredible book. It's inspiring. It's fact-filled, and it gives you a wonderful, holistic perspective of what it takes and what it's taken to get entrepreneurship to where it is today. So thanks again for joining us, and have a wonderful Friday evening.
Thank you. Thank you for doing such a great job moderating too. Thank you.
Thank you for writing that book.
everyone.
That was great.
Thanks.